The Magician's Nephew, Chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9. The Founding of Narnia. The lion was pacing to and fro about that empty land and singing his new song. It was softer and more lilting than the song in which he had called up the stars and the sun, a gentle rippling music. And as he walked and sang, the valley grew green with grass. It spread out from the lion like a pool. It ran up the sides of the little hills like a wave. In a few minutes it was creeping up the lower slopes of the distant mountains, making that young world every moment softer. A light wind could now be heard ruffling the grass. Soon there were other things besides grass. The higher slopes grew dark with heather. Patches of rougher and more bristling green appeared in the valley. Diggory did not know what they were until one began coming up quite close to him. It was a little spiky thing that threw out dozens of arms and covered these arms with green and grew larger at the rate of about an inch every 2 seconds. Then there were dozens of these things all around him now. When they were nearly as tall as himself, he saw what they were. "Trees!" he exclaimed. The nuance of it, as Polly said afterward, was that you weren't left in peace to watch it at all. Just as Diggory said "trees," he had to jump, because Uncle Andrew had sidled up to him again, and was just going to pick his pocket. It wouldn't have done Uncle Andrew much good if he had succeeded, for he was aiming at the right-hand pocket, because he still thought the green rings were homeward rings. But of course Diggory didn't want to lose either. "Stop!" cried the witch. "Stand back! No, further back! If any one goes within 10 paces of either of the children, I will knock out his brains." She was poising in her hand the iron bar that she had torn off the lamp-post, ready to throw it. Somehow, no one doubted that she would be a very good shot. "So," she said, "you would steal back to your own world with the boy and leave me here." Uncle Andrew's temper at last got the better of his fears. "Yes, ma'am, I would," he said. "Most undoubtedly I would. I should be perfectly in my rights. I have been most shamefully, most abominably treated. I have done my best to show you such civilities as were in my power, and what has been my reward? You have robbed, I must repeat the word, robbed, a highly respectable jeweler. You have insisted on my entertaining you to an exceedingly expensive, not to say ostentatious, lunch, though I was obliged to pawn my watch and chain in order to do so. And let me tell you, ma'am, that none of our family has been in the habit of frequenting pawn shops except my cousin Edward, and he was in yeomanry. During that indigestible meal, I'm feeling the worse for it at this very moment, your behavior and conversation attracted the unfavorable attention of everyone present. I feel I have been publicly disgraced. I shall never be able to show my face in that restaurant again. You have assaulted the police. You have stolen—" "Oh, stow it, governor, do stow it," said the cabby. "Watchin' and listenin's the thing at present, not talkin'." Please stop here and answer question 1. There was certainly plenty to watch and to listen to. The tree which Diggory had noticed was now a full-grown beech, whose branches swayed gently above his head. They stood on cool green grass sprinkled with daisies and buttercups. A little way off along the river bank willows were growing. On the other side tangles of flowering currant, lilac, wild rose, and rhododendron closed them in. The horse was tearing up delicious mouthfuls of the new grass. All this time the lion's song in his stately prowl to and fro, backward and forward, was going on. What was rather alarming was that at each turn he came a little nearer. Polly was finding the song more and more interesting because she thought she was beginning to see the connection between the music and the things that were happening. When a line of dark firs sprang up on a ridge about 100 yards away, she felt that they were connected with a series of deep, prolonged notes which the lion had sung a second before. And when he burst into a rapid series of lighter notes, she was not surprised to see primroses suddenly appearing in every direction. Thus, with an unspeakable thrill, she felt quite certain that all the things were coming, as she said, out of the lion's head. When you listened to his song, you heard the things he was making up, and when you looked around you, you saw them. This was so exciting that she had no time to be afraid. But Diggory and the cabby could not help feeling a bit nervous as each turn of the lion's walk brought him nearer. As for Uncle Andrew, his teeth were chattering, but his knees were shaking so that he could not run away. Please stop here and answer question 2. Suddenly the witch stepped boldly out toward the lion. It was coming on, always singing, with a slow, heavy pace. It was only 12 yards away. She raised her arm and flung the iron bar straight at its head. Nobody, least of all Jadis, could have missed at that range. The bar struck the lion fair between the eyes. It glanced off and fell with a thud in the grass. The lion came on. Its walk was neither slower nor faster than before. You could not tell whether it even knew it had been hit. Though its soft pads made no noise, you could feel the earth shake beneath their weight. The witch shrieked and ran. In a few moments she was out of sight among the trees. Uncle Andrew turned to do likewise, tripped over a root and fell flat on his face in a little brook that ran down to join the river. The children could not move. They were not even quite sure that they wanted to. The lion paid no attention to them. Its huge red mouth was open, but open in song, not in a snarl. It passed by them so close that they could have touched its mane. They were terribly afraid it would turn and look at them, yet in some queer way they wished it would. But for all the notice it took of them, they might as just as well have been invisible and unsmellable. When it had passed them and gone a few paces further, it turned, passed them again, and continued its march eastward. Uncle Andrew, coughing and sputtering, picked himself up. "Now, Diggory," he said, "we've got rid of that woman, and the brute of the lion is gone. Give me your hand and put on your ring at once." "Keep off," said Diggory, backing away from him. "Keep clear of him, Polly. Come over here beside me. Now I warn you, Uncle Andrew, don't come one step nearer. We'll just vanish." "Now do what you're told this minute, sir," said Uncle Andrew. "You're an extremely disobedient, ill-behaved little boy." "No fear," said Diggory. "We want to stay and see what happens. I thought you wanted to know about the other worlds. Don't you like it now you're here?" "Like it!" exclaimed Uncle Andrew. "Just look at the state I'm in. And it was my best coat and waistcoat, too." He certainly was a dreadful sight by now, for, of course, the more dressed up you were to begin with, the worse you'll look after you've crawled out of a smashed hansom cab and fallen into a muddy brook. "I'm not saying," he added, "that this is not a most interesting place. If I were a younger man now, perhaps I could get some lively young fellow to come here first, one of those big game hunters. Something might be made of this country. The climate is delightful. I never felt such air. I believe it would have done me good if circumstances had been more favorable. If only we'd had a gun." "Guns be blowed," said the cabby. "I think I'll go and see if I can give Strawberry a rub down. That horse has more sense than some humans, as I can mention." He walked back to Strawberry and began making the hissing noises that grooms make. "Do you still think that lion could be killed by a gun?" asked Diggory. "He didn't mind the iron bar much." "With all her faults," said Uncle Andrew, "that's a plucky gal, my boy. It was a spirited thing to do." He rubbed his hands and cracked his knuckles, as if he were once more forgetting how the witch frightened him whenever she was really there. "It was a wicked thing to do," said Polly. "What harm has he done to her?" "Hullo, what's that?" said Diggory. He had darted forward to examine something only a few yards away. "I say, Polly," he called back, "do come and look." Uncle Andrew came with her, not because he wanted to see, but because he wanted to keep close to the children, and there might be a chance of stealing their rings. But when he saw that Diggory was looking at, even he began to take an interest. It was a perfect little model of a lamp post, about 3 feet high, but lengthening and thickening in proportion, as they watched it, in fact growing just as the trees had grown. "It's alive, too. I mean, it's lit," said Diggory. And so it was, though of course the brightness of the sun made the little flame of the lantern hard to see unless your shadow fell on it. "Remarkable, most remarkable," muttered Uncle Andrew. "Even I never dreamed of magic like this. We're in a world where everything, even a lamp post, comes to life and grows. Now I wonder what sort of seed a lamp post grows from." "Don't you see?" said Diggory. "This is where the bar fell. The bar she tore off the lamp post at home. It sank into the ground, and now it's coming up as a young lamp post. But not so very young now. It was as tall as Diggory while he said that." Please stop here and answer question 3. "That's it! Stupendous! Stupendous!" said Uncle Andrew, rubbing his hands harder than ever. "Ho, ho, ho! They laughed at my magic. That fool of a sister of mine thinks I'm a lunatic. I wonder what they'll say now. I have discovered a world where everything is bursting with life and growth. Columbus, now, they talk about Columbus. But what has America to this? The commercial possibilities of this country are unbounded. Bring a few old bits of scrap iron here, bury 'em, and up they come as brand new railroad engines, battleships, anything you please. They'll cost nothing, and I can sell 'em at full price in England. I shall be a millionaire. And then the climate. I feel years younger already. I can run it as a health resort. A good sanatorium here might be worth 20,000 a year. Of course, I shall have to let a few people into the secret. The first thing is to get that brute shot." "You're just like the witch," said Polly. "All you think of is killing things." "And then, as regards to oneself," Uncle Andrew continued in a happy dream, "there's no knowing how long I might live if I settled here, and that's a big consideration when a fellow has turned 60. I shouldn't be surprised if I never grew a day older in this country. Stupendous! The land of youth." Please stop here and answer question 4. "Oh!" cried Diggory, "the land of youth! Do you really think it is?" For of course he remembered what Aunt Letty had said to the lady who brought the grapes, and that sweet hope rushed back upon him. "Uncle Andrew," he said, "do you think there is anything here that would cure Mother?" "What are you talking about?" said Uncle Andrew. "This isn't a chemist's shop. But as I was saying—" "You don't care twopence about her," said Diggory savagely. "I thought you might. After all, she's your sister as well as my mother. Well, no matter. I'm jolly well going to ask the lion himself if he can help me." And he turned and walked briskly away. Polly waited for a moment and then went after him. "Here, stop! Come back! The boy's gone mad," said Uncle Andrew. He followed the children at a cautious distance behind, for he didn't want to get too far away from the green rings or too near the lion. In a few minutes Diggory came to the edge of the wood, where he stopped. The lion was still singing, but now the song had once more changed. It was more like what we should call a tune, but it was also far wilder. It made you want to run and jump and climb. It made you want to shout. It made you want to rush at other people and either hug them or fight them. It made Diggory hot and red in the face. It had some effect on Uncle Andrew, for Diggory could hear him saying, "A spirited gal, sir. It's a pity shame about her temper, but a damn fine woman all the same. A damn fine woman." But what that song did to the two humans was nothing compared to what it was doing to the country. Can you imagine a stretch of grassy land bubbling like water in a pot? For that is really the best description of what was happening. In all directions it was swelling into humps. They were of very different sizes, some no bigger than molehills, some as big as wheelbarrows, two the size of cottages. And the humps moved and swelled till they burst, and the crumbled earth poured out of them, and from each hump there came out an animal. The moles came out just as you might see a mole come out of England. The dogs came out, barking the moment their heads were free, and struggling as you'd seen them do when they were getting through a narrow hole in the hedge. The stags were the queerest to watch, for of course the antlers came up a long time before the rest of them, so at first Diggory thought that they were trees. The frogs, who all came up near the river, went straight into it with a plop plop and a loud croaking. The panthers, leopards, and things of that sort sat down at once to wash the loose earth off their hind quarters, and then stood up against the trees to sharpen their front claws. Showers of birds came out of the trees, butterflies fluttered, bees got to work on the flowers as if they hadn't a second to lose. But the greatest moment of all was when the biggest humps broke like a small earthquake, and out came the sloping back, the large wise head, and the 4 baggy trousered legs of the elephant. And now you could hardly hear the song of the lion. There was so much cawing, cooing, crowing, braying, neighing, baying, barking, lowing, bleating, and trumpeting. But though Diggory could no longer hear the lion, he could see it. It was so big and so bright that he could not take his eyes off of it. The other animals did not appear to be afraid of it. Indeed, at that very moment Diggory heard the sound of hoofs from behind. A second later the old cab horse trotted past him and joined the other beasts. The air had apparently suited him as well as it had suited Uncle Andrew. He no longer looked like the poor old slave he had been in London. He was picking up his feet and holding his head erect. And now, for the first time, the lion was quite silent. He was going to and fro among the animals, and every now and then he would go up to 2 of them, always 2 at a time, and touch their noses with his. He would touch 2 beavers among all the beavers, 2 leopards among all the leopards, 1 stag and 1 deer among all the deer, and leave the rest. Some sorts of animals he passed over altogether, but the pairs which he had touched instantly left their own kinds and followed him. At last he stood still, and all the creatures whom he had touched came and stood in a wide circle around him. The others whom he had not touched began to wander away. Their noises faded gradually into the distance. The chosen beasts who remained were now utterly silent, all with their eyes fixed intently upon the lion. The cat-like ones gave an occasional twitch of the tail, but otherwise all were still. For the first time that day there was complete silence except for the noise of running water. Diggory's heart beat wildly. He knew something very solemn was going to be done. He had not forgotten about his mother, but he knew jolly well that even for her he couldn't interrupt a thing like this. The lion, whose eyes never blinked, stared at the animals as hard as if he was going to burn them up with his mere stare. And gradually a change came over them. The smaller ones, the rabbits, moles, and such like, grew a good deal larger. The very big ones, you noticed it most with the elephants, grew a little smaller. Many animals sat up on their hind legs. Most put their heads on one side, as if they were trying hard to understand. The lion opened his mouth, but no sound came from it. He was breathing out, a long warm breath. It seemed to sway all the beasts as wind sways a line of trees. Far overhead, from behind the veil of blue sky which hid them, the stars sang again, a pure, cold, difficult music. Then there came a swift flash like fire, but it burned nobody, either from the sky or from the lion itself, and every drop of blood tingled in the children's bodies. And the deepest, wildest voice they had ever heard was saying, "Narnia, Narnia, Narnia, awake, love, think, speak, be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters." Please stop here and answer question 5. Chapter 10. The First Joke and Other Matters. It was of course the lion's voice. The children had long felt for sure that he could speak, yet it was a lovely and terrible shock when he did. Out of the trees a wild people stepped forth, gods and goddesses of the wood, with them some fauns and satyrs and dwarfs. Out of the river rose the river god with his naiad daughters, and all these and all the beasts and birds in their different voices, low or high or thick or clear, replied, "Hail, Aslan! We hear and obey. We are awake. We love. We think. We speak. We know." "But, please, we don't know very much yet," said a nosy and snotty sort of voice, and that really did make the children jump, for it was the cab horse who had spoken. "Good old Strawberry," said Polly. "I am glad he was one of the ones picked out to be a talking beast." And the cabby, who was now standing beside the children, said, "Strike me pink. I always did say that 'oss had a lot of sense, though." "Creatures, I give you yourselves," said the strong, happy voice of Aslan. "I give to you forever this land of Narnia. I give you the woods, the fruits, the rivers. I give you the stars, and I give you myself. The dumb beasts, whom I have not chosen, are yours also. Treat them kindly and cherish them, but do not go back to their ways, lest you cease to be talking beasts. For out of them you were taken, and into them you can return. Do not so." Please stop here and answer question 6. "No, Aslan, we won't," said everyone. But one perky jackdaw added in a loud voice, "No fear," and everyone else had finished just before he said it, so that his words came out quite clear in the dead silence. And perhaps you have found out how awful that can be, say at a party. The jackdaw became so embarrassed that it hid its head under its wing as if it were going to sleep, and all the other animals began making various queer noises, which are their ways of laughing, and which, of course, no one had ever heard in our world. They tried at first to repress it, but Aslan said, "Laugh and fear not, creatures. Now that you are no longer dumb and witless, you need not always be grave, for jokes as well as justice come in with speech." So they all let themselves go, and there was such merriment that the jackdaw himself plucked up courage again and perched on the cab horse's head, between its ears, clapping its wings, and say, "Aslan, Aslan, have I made the first joke? Will everybody always be told how I made the first joke?" "No, little friend," said the lion. You have not made the first joke. You have only been the first joke. Then everyone laughed more than ever, but the jackdaw didn't mind, and laughed just as loud till the horse shook its head and the jackdaw lost its balance and fell off, but remembered its wings. They were still new to it, before it reached the ground. Please stop here and answer question 7. And now, said Aslan, Narnia is established. We must next take thought for keeping it safe. I will call some of you to my council. Come hither to me, you, the chief dwarf, and you, the river god, and you, oak, and the he-owl, and both the ravens and the bull-elephant. We must talk together, for though the world is not 5 hours old, an evil has already entered it. The creatures he had named came forward, and he turned away eastward with them. The others all began talking, saying things like, "What did he say had entered the world? An evil. What's an evil? No, he didn't say an evil, he said a weevil. Well, what's that?" "Look here," said Diggory to Polly, "I've got to go after him. Aslan, I mean the lion. I must speak to him." "Do you think we can?" said Polly. "I wouldn't dare." "I've got to," said Diggory. "It's about Mother. If anyone could give me something that could do her good, it would be him." "I'll come along with you," said the cabby. "I like the looks of him, and I don't reckon these other beasts will go for us, and I want a word with old Strawberry." So all three of them stepped out boldly, or as boldly as they could, toward the assembly of animals. The creatures were so busy talking to one another and making friends that they didn't notice the 3 humans until they were very close. Nor did they hear Uncle Andrew, who was standing trembling in his buttoned boots a good way off and shouting, but by no means at the top of his voice, "Diggory, come back! Come back at once when you're told! I forbid you to go a step further!" When at last they were right in among the animals all stopped talking and stared at them. "Well," said the he-beaver at last, "what in the name of Aslan are these?" "Please," began Diggory in rather a breathless voice, when a rabbit said, "They're a kind of large lettuce, that's my belief." "No, we're not. Honestly, we're not," said Polly hastily. "We're not at all nice to eat." "There," said the mole, "they can talk. Who ever heard of a talking lettuce?" "Perhaps they're the second joke," suggested the jackdaw. A panther, who had been washing its face, stopped for a moment to say, "Well, if they are, they're nothing like so good as the first one. At least, I don't see anything very funny about them." It yawned and went on with its wash. "Oh, please," said Diggory, "I'm in such a hurry. I want to see the lion." All this time the cabby had been trying to catch Strawberry's eye. Now he did. "Now, Strawberry, old boy," he said, "you know me. You ain't going to stand there and say as you don't know me." "What's that thing talking about, horse?" said several voices. "Well," said Strawberry very slowly, "I don't exactly know. I think most of us don't know much about anything yet, but I've a sort of idea I've seen a thing like this before. I've a feeling I lived somewhere else, or was something else, before Aslan woke us all up a few minutes ago. It's all very muddled, like a dream, but there were things like these 3 in the dream." "What?" said the cabby. "Not know me? Me? What used to bring you a hot mash of an evening when you was out of sorts? Me, what rubbed you down proper? Me, what never forgot to put your cloth on if you was standing in the cold? I wouldn't have thought it of you, Strawberry." "It does begin to come back," said the horse thoughtfully. "Yes, let me think now, let me think. Yes, you used to tie a horrid black thing behind me and then hit me to make me run, and however far I ran, this black thing would always become rattling behind me." "We had our living to earn, see," said the cabby, "yours the same as mine. And if there hadn't been no work and no whip, there'd have been no stable, no hay, no mash, and no oats, for you did get a taste of oats when I could afford 'em, which no one can deny." Please stop here and answer question 8. "Oats?" said the horse, pricking up his ears. "Yes, I remember something about that. Yes, I remember more and more. You were always sitting up somewhere behind, and I was always running in front, pulling you and the black thing. I know I did all the work." "Summer, I grant you," said the cabby. "Hot work for you, and a cold seat for me. But what about winter, old boy, when you was keeping yourself warm, and I was sitting up there with my feet like ice and my nose fair pinched off me with the wind, and my hands that numb I couldn't hardly hold the reins. It was a hard, cruel country, said Strawberry. There was no grass, all hard stones. Too true, mate, too true, said the cabby. A hard world it was. I always did say those paving stones weren't fair on any 'oss. That's London, that is. I didn't like it no more than what you did. You were a country 'oss, and I was a country man. Used to sing in the choir, I did, down at 'ome, but there wasn't a living for me there. Oh, please, please, said Dickory, could we get on? The lion's getting farther and farther away, and I do want to speak to him so dreadfully bad. Look here, Strawberry, said the cabby, this young gentleman has something on his mind that he wants to talk to the lion about. 'Im you call Aslan. Suppose you was to let him ride on your back, which he'd take very kindly, and trot him over to where the lion is, and me and the little girl will be following along. Ride, said Strawberry. Oh, I remember now. That means sitting on my back. I remember there used to be a little one of you two-leggers who used to do that long ago. He used to have little hard square lumps of some white stuff that he gave me. They tasted, oh, wonderful, sweeter than grass. Ah, that'd be sugar, said the cabby. Please, Strawberry, begged Dickory. Do let me get up and take me to Aslan. Well, I don't mind, said the horse, not for once in a way. Up you get. Good old Strawberry, said the cabby. Here, young'un, I'll give you a lift. Diggory was soon on Strawberry's back and quite comfortable, for he had ridden bareback before on his own pony. Now, do gee up, Strawberry, he said. You don't happen to have a bit of that white stuff about you, I suppose? Said the horse. No, I'm afraid I hadn't, said Diggory. Well, it can't be helped, said Strawberry, and off they went. At that moment a large bulldog, who had been sniffing and staring very hard, said, Look, isn't there another of those queer creatures? Over there, beside the river, under the trees. Then all the animals looked and saw Uncle Andrew, standing very still among the rhododendrons and hoping he wouldn't be noticed. Come on, said several voices. Let's go and find out. So while Strawberry was briskly trotting away with Dickory in one direction and Polly and the cabby were following on foot, most of the creatures rushed toward Uncle Andrew with roars, barks, grunts, and various noises of cheerful interest. Now, we must now go back a bit and explain that the whole scene had looked like from Uncle Andrew's point of view. It had not made at all the same impression on him as on the cabby and the children. For what you see and hear depends a good deal on where you are standing. It also depends on what sort of person you are. Ever since the animals had first appeared, Uncle Andrew had been shrinking further and further back into the thicket. He watched them very hard, of course, but he wasn't really interested in seeing what they were doing, only in seeing whether they were going to make a rush at him. Like the witch, he was dreadfully practical. He simply didn't notice that Aslan was choosing one pair out of every kind of beasts. All he saw, or thought he saw, was a lot of dangerous wild animals walking vaguely about, and he kept on wondering why the other animals didn't run away from the big lion. When the great moment came and the beasts spoke, he missed the whole point, for a rather interesting reason. When the lion had first begun singing, long ago when it was still quite dark, he had realized that the noise was a song, and he had disliked that song very much. It made him think and feel things he did not want to think and feel. Then when the sun rose and he saw that the singer was a lion, only a lion, he said to himself, he tried his hardest to make believe that it wasn't singing, and it never had been singing, only roaring as any lion might in a zoo in our world. Of course it can't really be singing, he thought. I must have imagined it. I've been letting my nerves get out of order. Who ever heard of a lion singing? And the longer and more beautiful the lion sang, the harder Uncle Andrew tried to make himself believe that he could hear nothing but roaring. Now, the trouble about trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. Uncle Andrew did. He soon did hear nothing but roaring in Aslan's song. Soon he couldn't have heard anything else even if he wanted to. And when at last the lion spoke and said, Narnia, wake, he didn't hear any words. He only heard a snarl. And when the beasts spoke in answer, he heard only barkings, growlings, bangs, and howlings. And when they laughed, well, you can imagine. That was worse for Uncle Andrew than anything that had happened yet. Such a horrid, bloodthirsty din of hungry and angry brutes he had never heard in his life. Then, to his utter rage and horror, he saw that the other three humans actually walking out into the open to meet the animals. Please stop here and answer question 9. The fools, he said to himself. Now those brutes will eat the rings along with the children, and I'll never be able to get home again. What a selfish little boy that Diggory is! And the others are just as bad. If they want to throw away their own lives, that's their business. But what about me? They don't seem to think about that. No one thinks of me. Finally, when a whole crowd of animals came rushing toward him, he turned and ran for his life. And now everyone could see that the air of that young world was really doing that old gentleman good. In London he had been far too old to run. Now he ran at a speed which would have made him certain to win a 100 yards race at any prep school in England. His coat tails flying out behind him were a fine sight, but of course it was no use. Many of the animals behind him were swift ones. It was the first run they had ever taken in their lives, and they were all longing to use their new muscles. After him, they shouted. Perhaps that's the Neville. Tally-ho! Tant-divvy! Cut him off! Round him up! Keep him up! Hurrah! In a very few minutes some of them got ahead of him. They lined up in a row and barred his way. Others hemmed him in from behind. Wherever he looked he saw terrors, antlers of great elks and the huge face of an elephant towering over him. Heavy, serious-minded bears and boars grunted behind him. Cool-looking leopards and panthers with sarcastic faces, as he thought, stared at him and waved their tails. What struck him most of all was the number of open mouths. The animals had really opened their mouths to pant. He thought they had opened their mouths to eat him. Uncle Andrew stood trembling and swaying this way and that. He had never liked the animals at the best of times, being usually rather afraid of them, and of course years of doing cruel experiments on animals had made him hate and fear them far more. "Now, sir," said the bulldog in his businesslike way, "are you animal, vegetable, or mineral?" That was what it was really said, but all Uncle Andrew heard was a growl. Please stop here and answer question 10.